want you to picture something for a second. Just bear with me here. Imagine you are holding a plastic water bottle,
Okay, I'm picturing it.
and it's completely full, like crisp, clear, perfectly cold water. Now, imagine you just take the cap off, tip it over, and pour it directly onto the floor.
Oh, yeah, that's just a tragic waste of good water.
Right. You just stand there and watch it soak into the carpet or, spread across the linoleum. It's just gone. You can't scoop it back up. You can't run it through a filter. And you certainly can't drink it later when you are inevitably thirsty.
I mean, unless you want a mouthful of carpet fuzz, which, no thanks.
Exactly. Yeah. It is just gone. Now, if I asked you how much of your actual drinking water you intentionally pour on the floor every single day, you would probably look at me like I was completely out of my mind.
I would. I'd say, 0. Why would I ever do that?
Right. But if we switch out the water in that bottle for the hours in your day, how much of your time is just, pooling on the floor?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is a genuinely uncomfortable question to sit with because, I mean, unlike water, which we can physically see and measure and, feel splashing onto our shoes, time is entirely invisible.
It really is. It just slips by.
Exactly. We don't feel the physical weight of it leaving the bottle. We don't hear it hitting the ground. We just sort of suddenly arrive at the end of the day feeling strangely thirsty, exhausted, and wondering where it all went.
Yeah.
The invisibility of time is precisely what makes it so easy to spill.
It's that visceral image, the pouring of time onto the floor. That is the foundation of our deep dive today. And we're exploring a really fascinating text. And to be honest, it comes from the most unlikely place imaginable.
Yeah, the source for this one is wild.
It really is. We are extracting this hidden masterclass in cognitive psychology from a transcript designed for a YouTube channel called Speak English with Class.
Which is just so cool.
Right. Now, on the surface, you'd think this is strictly for English language learners.
Yeah.
I mean, the educators in the text are going over vocabulary and sharing anecdotes to help people master a second language.
Sure.
But when you look past the surface-level definitions and you really examine the specific frameworks and analogies they're using to teach these words, it becomes something entirely different.
It really does. It's a universal, highly sophisticated blueprint for time management and, honestly, the fundamental architecture of habit building.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought when I read it.
What makes this approach so compelling is how it just completely bypasses the complex corporate jargon we usually associate with productivity.
Oh, thank goodness for that. No synergy or whatever.
Exactly. No synergy. There are no complicated flowcharts here. There are no rigid scheduling matrices or expensive time-blocking apps being sold to you. Instead, it relies on basic, elemental linguistics.
Just words.
Just words. By teaching foundational English vocabulary, these educators accidentally built a fail-proof psychological blueprint for constructing consistent habits in any area of your life without the inevitable burnout.
Which is huge because burnout is always what gets us.
Right. It takes the listener by the hand and shifts them from being a passive consumer of time, someone who just watches the clock tick away, into an intentional architect of their daily routine.
So our mission today is to unpack what they call a vocabulary tour. We're going to take these specific words they highlight, pull them apart, and look at the gears turning inside them to construct that blueprint.
I love that, looking at the gears.
Because the struggles they describe in this text are just so incredibly relatable. I mean, we have all fallen into the just one more video trap.
Oh, absolutely, countless times.
We've all set a massive life-altering goal on January 1st and completely abandoned it by, January 14th?
If we're lucky to make it to the 14th, yeah.
Exactly. The beauty of this material is that it figures out exactly why that happens biologically and psychologically, and more importantly, how to fix it using precise language.
Language shapes our reality, and, that isn't just a philosophical statement, it's neurological. The words we use to describe our actions totally dictate how our brain categorizes and responds to those actions.
Wait, really? Just the words themselves?
Yeah, literally the words. If we don't have the precise vocabulary to define our behaviors, we literally lack the cognitive scaffolding required to change them.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Right. So before we can even begin to talk about building good habits, we have to precisely define what breaking bad ones actually entails. We have to establish the foundational linguistics of time.
And that brings us right to the first major distinction made in the text, which is the vast difference between two crucial words: waste and invest.
Two very loaded words.
Very loaded. Let's start with waste. It's a word we use all the time, usually to make ourselves feel guilty, honestly.
Yeah.
But the text defines wasting time with incredible specificity.
It's not just a vague feeling for them.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
They say it is using your time for something that is not important and not helpful. Specifically, they give us a three-part criteria. Time is wasted if it is neither helping you grow, helping you learn, nor properly resting you.
Right.
If an activity doesn't hit one of those three buckets, it is the water on the floor.
That three-part criteria, growth, learning, rest, is such a vital framework. And, notice what is completely absent from that definition?
That's that.
The concept of entertainment.
Oh.
It has nothing to do with whether an activity is fun or not fun. We constantly confuse wasting time with enjoying ourselves, which leads to a lot of unnecessary guilt.
So true. We think if we're having fun, we must be wasting time.
Exactly. But this is a very clinical distinction. If a fun activity doesn't serve one of those three biological or psychological functions, so growth, learning, or genuine restorative rest, it is classified as a waste. Contrast that to their definition of the word invest. To invest means using time, money, or energy right now to acquire something better in the future. It's this active, forward-looking state.
I really appreciate how they physicalize this concept of wasted time with another brilliant analogy. They call it the sand in the hands feeling.
Oh, I felt that one.
We all know that exact sensation,
Yeah.
right? You open your fingers and you just helplessly watch the sand slip away between them. You can't grip it, you can't hold on to it, and it leaves you with this very specific lingering feeling of regret.
Yes, regret is the key word there.
But okay, here is where I want to push back on this framework a bit. On behalf of anyone listening who is thinking exactly what I was thinking when I read this section,
All right, lay it on me.
let's play out a scenario. Let's say I've had a genuinely brutal day at work. Like my brain is completely fried. I come home, I collapse onto the couch, and I scroll on my phone, watching random, funny, short videos for, I don't know, 45 minutes.
A very standard Tuesday night.
Exactly. According to this strict three-part criteria, that might be called a waste. But isn't that a form of resting my brain? I mean, isn't just zoning out and laughing at a dog on a skateboard a legitimate, necessary way to recover from a hard day?
It is the absolute most common and intuitive defense of that behavior, and it's the exact trap we all fall into.
Right. It feels like rest.
It feels like it. But if we dive into the neuroscience of what is actually happening in your brain during that 45 minutes, we can dismantle that defense entirely. Real rest-like, genuine, biological rest charges the battery.
Okay.
It activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode. It lowers your heart rate and reduces cortisol. Wasting time in the way you just described actually drains the battery further, even though your physical body is lying perfectly still on the couch.
Okay, wait. How does lying on a couch watching comedy drain my battery? I'm not doing anything. My body's practically a potato at that point.
Because your brain is doing an immense amount of work. When you are scrolling through rapid-fire short-form content, your brain isn't resting at all. It is processing micro hits of dopamine, and honestly, more importantly, it is rapidly context switching.
Context switch.
Yeah, think about what happens in a typical 3-minute scrolling session. You watch a funny dog video, you laugh, then you swipe, and suddenly you are looking at a tragic news story from a war zone.
Oh, man. Yeah, the whiplash is real.
Exactly. Your brain has to instantly recalibrate its emotional and cognitive framework from humor to grief. Then you swipe again, and it's an advertisement for a blender requiring analytical evaluation. Swipe again, it's a cooking tutorial.
It's just nonstop.
Every single time you swipe, your brain expends glucose to tear down the previous context and construct a new one. The cognitive load, the sheer metabolic cost of that rapid context switching is incredibly high.
So my physical body is practically comatose on the couch, but my brain is running a decathlon on a treadmill.
That is the perfect way to phrase it. You are forcing your brain to sprint while your body is stationary. And this is why the text gives us the ultimate psychological marker to distinguish between genuine rest and wasted time, and that's regret.
The sand in the hands.
Right. It's the diagnostic tool for that feeling.
Okay.
Think about it. When you wake up from a 20-minute nap, or you finish a quiet walk around the block without your phone, or even when you sit down and watch a beautifully crafted 2-hour movie that you intentionally chose, when it's over, you don't usually say, why did I just do that?
No, I usually feel great. I feel restored. Like my parasympathetic nervous system was actually engaged.
Precisely. You feel like you've landed back in your own body. But when you snap out of a 45-minute algorithmic doom scroll, What is the internal monologue?
It is almost exclusively negative.
Yeah.
You feel hollow, you feel a little guilty,
Yeah.
and crucially, from a physiological standpoint, you feel significantly more tired than when you sat down.
Exactly. That feeling of regret, that hollow exhaustion, is your brain's biological indicator that the time was not invested in rest. The time was wasted. The battery wasn't charged, it was depleted.
That is a profound paradigm shift. I mean, the regret itself is the diagnostic tool. If you feel regret at the end of the activity, it was sand slipping through your fingers. If you feel restored, it was water you actually drank and utilized.
Beautifully put.
So if we accept this definition, if we can clinically diagnose the difference between wasting and investing time, the natural next question is, how do we actually start investing?
That's the million-dollar question.
Because knowing that you shouldn't pour water on the floor and actually stopping yourself from doing it are two entirely different universes of behavior.
They absolutely are. And this is where we move into the structural phase of this vocabulary tour. It begins with how we architect our plans. The text introduces two opposing words here that dictate whether a habit will survive or die in its infancy: vague and intentional.
Yes, let's unpack these. They define vague simply as not clear. And the examples they give are just devastatingly relatable because they're the exact kind of goals every single one of us sets on New Year's Eve.
Oh, the classic New Year's resolutions.
Right. I will improve my English. I will get fit. I will be more productive at work. I will study for 1 hour every day. On the surface, if you tell a friend these goals, they sound fantastic.
Very aspirational.
But the text pairs these vague goals with what I genuinely think is the most illuminating analogy in the entire material, and that's the GPS analogy.
The GPS analogy perfectly illustrates the cognitive failure of a vague ambition. Walk us through how they frame it.
All right, imagine this. You walk out of your house, you get into your car, and you turn the engine on. The GPS screen on your dashboard lights up, the cursor is blinking, waiting for an input.
Okay, I'm with you.
If you just tap the screen and shout, "Take me somewhere better," or "Take me to a healthier place," what happens?
Well, the car doesn't move.
Right. Or worse, you just put it in drive and start moving in random directions, hoping you find this magical better place. You take a left, you take a right, you end up on the highway, you get confused and get off the highway.
You're just burning gas at that point.
You are burning petrol, you are burning time, you are frustrated, and you are getting absolutely nowhere. You are driving in circles because you never gave the navigation system a specific recognizable address.
Yeah, that hits home.
The argument here is that setting a vague goal like "I will study for an hour" or "I will get fit" is the exact equivalent of telling your brain's GPS to just, drive.
And this is where the neuroscience perfectly backs up their analogy. When you give your brain a vague instruction, you are activating the prefrontal cortex, which is the planning center. But you aren't giving the basal ganglia, the habit execution center, anything to actually grip onto.
The basal ganglia doesn't do vague.
No, not at all. It doesn't understand better. It understands actionable sequences. This is where the word intentional becomes the antidote. The text defines intentional as doing something on purpose with a specific design, not by accident.
So to be intentional with your car's GPS, you can't just say, "Take me to fitness." You have to type in an exact street name, an exact house number, and a zip code, like 123 Main Street.
Exactly.
In the realm of habit building, this is what the educators call the tiny plan strategy.
Shrinking the ambition down to a microscopic, hyper-specific level.
Exactly. Instead of the vague goal, "I will improve my English," the tiny intentional plan is, "I will learn 3 new vocabulary words today." Or instead of the massive goal, "I will study for 1 hour," the tiny plan is, "I will do exactly 10 minutes of reading."
It is a precise set of coordinates.
Right. Turn here, go straight for 1 mile, you have arrived at your destination.
Let's dissect exactly why that 1-hour daily plan fails so predictably for almost everyone and why the 10-minute tiny plan succeeds. Because it's not just about time management. It is rooted deeply in how our brains calculate cognitive load, friction, and fear.
Fear. Yeah.
In the source material, one of the speakers shares a very vulnerable personal anecdote. They resolved to study a new language for 1 full hour every single day.
That's a huge commitment.
It is. And they admit that it was just too big. They got tired. They skipped a day. Then they skipped 2 days. And they ultimately felt terrible about themselves. But when they shifted the architecture of the plan to just 10 minutes a day, they actually succeeded in building the habit.
Right. They specifically noted how their emotional state changed. They said they realized they could easily keep that 10-minute promise. They didn't feel scared to start. and they felt a sense of pride every single time they finished it.
I want to isolate that specific phrase. Didn't feel scared to start.
Yeah, that stood out to me too.
That is the biological key to this entire framework. When you set a massive, vague goal like grinding at the gym for an hour or studying a language for an hour, your brain looks at that instruction and sees a massive mountain of effort. It instantly calculates the metabolic friction required to achieve it.
It's doing the math in the background.
Exactly. It knows it will be hard, it knows it will be uncomfortable, and it knows you are probably already tired from your day. So the amygdala, which is the part of the brain that processes fear, stress, and threats, actually generates a resistance response. You literally experience a psychological and physiological barrier to entry.
It's that feeling of sitting on the couch in your gym clothes, staring at your shoes and feeling like they weigh 1,000 pounds.
Precisely. That heavy feeling is your amygdala telling you that the energy cost is too high. So what do? You rationalize. You put it off until you have more energy tomorrow, which of course never happens.
Never. Tomorrow is a myth.
Right. But let's look at the alternative. You set a 10-minute tiny plan or a goal to learn just 3 words, or even just to put on your shoes and walk to the end of the driveway.
Something ridiculously small.
Yes. Your brain analyzes that instruction and says, well, that's nothing. The energy cost for that is negligible. There's barely any friction there at all. It lowers the cognitive barrier to entry so drastically that the amygdala doesn't fire. The resistance evaporates because the threat of exhaustion is gone.
It's like telling yourself you don't have to clean the entire disaster of a kitchen. You just have to wash 3 forks. I mean, anyone, no matter how exhausted, can wash 3 forks.
Exactly.
But what usually happens, and I think the text implies this beautifully, is that once you overcome that initial friction of simply initiating the action, you often end up doing much more. The speaker even mentions, some days I did more, but my promise to myself was just 10 minutes. The 10 minutes is just the trick to get the engine running.
It is a brilliant psychological Trojan horse. But there is a secondary, perhaps even more important mechanism at play here, which is the preservation of self-trust.
Ooh, self-trust. Tell me more about that.
Consistency is born exclusively from promises we can actually keep. If you set a goal for an hour and you quit after 20 minutes, you have biologically failed. You broke a promise to yourself. You damage your own self-trust, and you induce that feeling of regret and guilt we talked about earlier.
And guilt is a terrible motivator.
It's a complete demotivator. But when you make a tiny, intentional plan of 10 minutes and you execute it, you build self-trust. You prove to your subconscious that you are someone who follows through on their word. The tiny plan isn't actually about managing your time. It is about managing your identity.
Wow.
Yeah. It removes the fear of starting and replaces it with inevitable victory.
Okay, so we are building this blueprint.
Yeah.
We know the physiological difference between wasting and investing time. We have scrapped our vague, grandiose ambitions and replaced them with highly intentional, tiny plans. We have our exact GPS coordinates.
Right.
But I know exactly what the listener is thinking right now, because I am thinking it too. I can hear people shouting through their headphones, this is all great in theory, but I still don't have the time.
Yep, the classic time crunch.
Even finding a dedicated 10 minutes is hard when I'm working a full-time job, cooking dinner, commuting, and trying to keep my entire life from falling apart. And that totally valid frustration brings us to what I believe is the most innovative, actionable concept in the entire text.
Yes. We are moving from the psychology of planning into the economics of the clock.
Exactly. The concept of pocket time. This is our next vocabulary term, and it completely blew my mind.
It's worth noting that pocket time isn't a standard English dictionary term. As the educators point out, it's an idiom they're using to create a conceptual framework.
It's a great image, though.
It is. They define it as those fragmented, microscopic pieces of time scattered throughout your day. 3 minutes here, 5 minutes there, 7 minutes somewhere else. Almost universally, this is time spent waiting for something else to happen.
To explain this, they use this incredible analogy of coins. They say, I want you to think of a full, uninterrupted hour as a big coin, like a heavy, shiny gold piece. Naturally, we all want the big gold coins.
Who wouldn't?
Right. But throughout the course of a normal day, the universe is constantly handing you all this small change. 3 minutes waiting for the bus to arrive, 5 minutes sitting in the back of an Uber, 7 minutes standing in the kitchen waiting for the water to finally boil for the pasta.
That pasta water takes forever.
It really does. Most of us look at those small coins, determine they have no purchasing power, and we essentially throw them straight into the trash. We pull out our phones and we just scroll, scroll, scroll to kill the time until the real event happens.
We view those micro moments as utterly useless because we have been conditioned by traditional productivity advice to operate under a false assumption.
Which is?
The assumption that meaningful, transformative work requires a large, uninterrupted block of time. We suffer from the illusion that if we don't possess a 60-minute big gold coin, we can't buy anything of intellectual or personal value.
But the text destroys that illusion with a fantastic anecdote about a friend of the speaker. This friend is a mother of 2 children, and she holds down a demanding full-time job.
She is the definition of busy.
Exactly. She told the speaker, I never, ever have 1 full hour to myself. It doesn't exist, but I have many, many small minutes. And she used those fragmented minutes to completely master a new language.
Which sounds impossible, but it's not.
Right. How? 5 minutes walking from her house to the bus stop. 10 minutes during her lunch break at work. 7 minutes sitting on the edge of the bed before going to sleep. She didn't magically find a gold coin. She just stopped throwing her pennies in the trash.
That's a great way to put it.
She linked them all together, and as the text beautifully states, those little coins turned into a big treasure.
It is the ultimate real-world application of compounding interest applied to time management. But we need to look closely at the underlying mechanics of how she actually accomplished that without going crazy, because it connects to another vital vocabulary word from the lesson, and that word is routine. Right. The text defines routine simply as the normal, established order of things you do every single day without thinking. The sheer genius of this busy mother isn't just that she recognized she had 5 minutes. It's exactly where she found those 5 minutes.
Break that down for me. What do you mean by where she found them?
Well, she didn't try to insert a new standalone block of time into a day that was already overflowing with stress and obligations. Instead, she took her tiny plans and she attached them to existing, non-negotiable daily actions.
Oh, like the things she absolutely had to do anyway.
Exactly. Walking to the bus,
Hmm.
eating her lunch, getting into bed. In behavioral psychology, this is known as habit stacking, a concept popularized by researchers like B.J. Fogg. You take a tiny, intentional plan like reviewing 3 flashcards, and you practically glue it to an action your body's already doing on autopilot.
Oh, I see. The text actually gives a few specific examples of this. They mention listening to a 5-minute educational podcast while washing the dinner dishes, or reading 5 lines of a short story while standing in line waiting for a coffee. The dishwashing and the coffee waiting are the established immovable routines. The tiny plan is just hitching a ride on them.
Precisely. And the neurological benefit of this is massive. By mining your pocket time and securely attaching it to an established routine, you fundamentally shift the nature of habit building.
How so?
It transforms from being a massive standalone chore that requires a huge activation of willpower into a frictionless, ambient part of your environment. You don't have to psych yourself up and summon the sheer discipline to sit down at a formal desk at 8.00 p.m.
Which, let's face it, no one wants to do.
Exactly. You just have to glance at a vocabulary word while the kettle is already boiling. The environmental cue, the kettle boiling, triggers the habit for you.
Okay, I love the elegance of this, but I have to play devil's advocate here because I know there's a skeptic listening who is thinking exactly this.
Let's hear it.
Does reading 5 lines of a story while waiting for a latte actually amount to anything meaningful? It feels so incredibly fragmented. I mean, can you really learn a language or master a complex skill or write a book in random 3-minute increments sprinkled throughout the day?
It is an excellent, essential question, and it forces us to make a distinction between different types of cognitive work. You are absolutely right that you cannot write a novel in 3-minute increments at a bus stop.
That would be a very disjointed novel.
It really would. Deep, synthetic work-like writing, complex coding, or high-level strategic planning requires what Cal Newport calls deep work. It requires 20 minutes just to overcome context residue and enter a flow state. Pocket time is useless for that.
Right, so pocket time isn't a magical cure-all.
It's not. But here is where the science of neuroplasticity comes in. While you can't use pocket time for deep synthesis, it is arguably the most effective way to handle formative acquisition things like learning a language, memorizing facts, or building a physical habit like doing 5 push-ups.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, when you are acquiring a new baseline skill, the brain values frequency far more than it values duration.
Really? Frequency beats duration.
In many cases, yes. Spaced repetition is a proven cognitive phenomenon. Exposing your brain to a new concept for 5 minutes 6 times a day signals to your brain that this information is constantly relevant to your waking environment.
Oh, because it keeps popping up.
Exactly. It forces the brain to myelinate those neural pathways faster to keep up with the constant demand. If you cram for one continuous 30-minute block on a Sunday, the brain says, okay, that was an isolated event. I can probably forget that by Tuesday.
Wow.
So yes, those 5 lines at the coffee shop, combined with the 3 words at the bus stop, create a web of continuous high-frequency learning that is highly effective for acquisition.
That is fascinating. So pocket time is for compounding interest on tiny habits, not for building Rome in a single afternoon.
Exactly.
But here is where the narrative takes a dark turn. Because as we are trying to utilize our pocket time and stack our habits, the text warns us that we are not operating in a safe environment.
We definitely aren't.
There is an active, aggressive threat in our pockets trying to steal those 5-minute windows before we can even realize they are there. Which brings us to our next crucial vocabulary phrase, the time thief.
A time thief is clinically defined by the educators as something that steals your time without giving you anything remotely good or useful in return. And they do not mince words. They immediately identify the primary suspect, social media.
The ultimate thief.
The ultimate. Now, they are diplomatic. They are careful to say that social media can be nice for connecting with friends, but they issue a stark warning. If you aren't careful, it takes and takes and takes.
They share a story in this section that is almost too painful to read because it is so universally recognizable. One of the speakers talks about a day where their brain felt genuinely tired, so they decided to take a 10-minute break. A tiny, intentional plan for rest. Perfect.
Sounds innocent enough.
Right? They sit down on the sofa, they open their phone, and they watch a funny video. They laugh. It's genuinely nice. But then, the algorithm kicks in. Before they can lock the phone, another video autoplays. And they think the single most dangerous, destructive sentence in the modern human language. Okay, just one more.
Just one more is the trapdoor that leads straight to the basement.
It really is. We've all fallen through it. A funny video leads to a short clip of a movie, which leads to scrolling down to read a vicious comment fight, which somehow leads to a tragic news story about the economy.
It escalates so quickly.
And suddenly they snap out of a trance, check the clock, and an hour and 15 minutes have evaporated. A 10-minute intentional break morphed into a 75-minute uncontrolled spiral.
Yeah.
It was the biological result. Their brain felt incredibly full of information, but they hadn't actually learned anything. They felt empty, guilty, and substantially more tired than when they sat down. The time thief didn't just steal an hour of their day, it actively stole their baseline energy.
This anecdote perfectly illustrates the asymmetrical warfare we are currently fighting against our devices. This is why willpower alone fails. You sit down with the naive intention of a 10-minute break. But the platform you are interacting with isn't a passive tool.
Far from it.
It has been meticulously engineered by thousands of the smartest behavioral scientists and neurologists on the planet, with one singular financial goal to maximize your time on screen. Features like autoplay, the infinite scroll, and the algorithmic curation of alternating outrage and humor, they are explicitly designed to bypass your prefrontal cortex.
The prefrontal cortex being the part of the brain that says, hey, it's been 10 minutes, time to get up.
Exactly. The prefrontal cortex is your logical braking system. These apps are designed to disable the brakes and directly stimulate your dopamine receptors using what's called a variable ratio reward schedule.
A variable ratio reward schedule.
Yeah, it's the exact same psychological mechanism that makes a slot machine addictive. You swipe down, not knowing if you'll get a jackpot, like a hilarious video, or a dud, like a boring ad. That unpredictability spikes dopamine, creating a compulsion loop. You are bringing a tiny handwritten plan to $1 billion psychological knife fight. You are going to lose.
Okay, so if willpower is useless against billion-dollar algorithms, we have to play defense. We have to guard the house. The text suggests a strategy they call locking the door.
Which is very practical.
It is. They offer practical, physical barriers, putting the phone entirely in another room while you execute your tiny plan. Creating a rule that you only check social media after you finish your daily goal, turning off notifications for just 1 hour. And I really love the framing they use here because it removes the guilt. They say, you don't hate the thief, but you protect your house.
That is a profound philosophical distinction. It completely removes the moral judgment from the technology and from yourself.
Exactly. It's the intruder analogy. Let's say you know for a fact there is a prolific burglar operating in your neighborhood, And he is really good at picking locks. You don't spend all day sitting in your living room, shaking your fist in anger, obsessing over how much you hate the burglar.
No, that would be a huge waste of energy.
A massive waste of your emotional energy. You just go to the hardware store and you install a heavy deadbolt, you protect your house and move on with your life. We don't have to vilify our phones, and we don't have to dramatically declare that technology is evil. We just have to set physical boundaries. We install a deadbolt, we put the phone in the other room so our pocket time stays ours.
It's a crucial defensive strategy. But defense alone is an incomplete blueprint. If habit building is just a constant grinding exercise in discipline, locking doors and fighting off intruders, it becomes an exhausting, joyless chore.
That sounds miserable, honestly.
It is, and the educators in this text recognize this flaw, which is why they insist that while we must play defense, we must also aggressively play offense. And their offensive strategy is shockingly simple, yet scientifically profound. Make it fun.
This connects perfectly to what you were explaining earlier about the amygdala rejecting friction. The text argues that if a habit feels like a punishment, your brain will actively run away from it.
100%.
They use a really poignant example of a child playing a game. If a child is naturally playing, they're engaged. But if an adult stands over that child and constantly shouts, "Do it perfectly, don't make mistakes, learn faster," what
The
happens?
child shuts down.
Yeah, the child freezes, cries, or just stops playing altogether. The joy is murdered by the pressure.
Because the brain naturally and aggressively avoids constant stress. If your new habit, whether it is learning a language, exercising, or writing, always feels heavy, deadly serious, and demands flawless perfection, your brain will categorize that activity as a direct threat to your energy reserves.
A physical threat.
Yes, it will release cortisol. It will say, "This is hurting us, we need to stop." This is why connecting the habit to fun isn't just a nice, fluffy bonus to make you feel good. It is a neurological requirement for long-term consistency. You have to convince the amygdala that the activity is safe.
The text gives some incredibly creative examples of how to actually do this. One of the speakers talks about printing out the lyrics to a pop song they absolutely love, circling the new vocabulary words, and just belting it out in the shower, trying to copy the singer's exact voice and accent.
I love that one.
Right. The other speaker talks about watching a really compelling dramatic TV series, but they watch it first with subtitles in their native language to understand the plot, and then immediately rewatch it with English subtitles. They are integrating their tiny plan into activities they inherently already enjoy doing. They are, as the text puts it, turning learning into a game.
This is a phenomenal neurohack. When you consciously connect a new, potentially difficult habit to an existing joy, you hijack the brain's reward system in a positive way.
So you're fighting dopamine with dopamine.
Exactly. Remember that dopamine we talked about earlier, the stuff the time thieves steal? You can generate it yourself. You get the natural dopamine hit from listening to your favorite music or being engrossed in a great story. And the new habit, the learning, hitches a ride on that dopamine wave. It fundamentally recategorizes the habit in your brain from draining, awful chore to energizing, rewarding play.
It's like hiding the dog's medicine inside a piece of cheese. The dog just thinks it's getting cheese.
That's the perfect analogy. You are hiding the friction inside the fun.
But this brings us to a really crucial pivot in the source material, because I can see a danger here. If we get hyper-focused on investing time, if we're obsessively utilizing every 3-minute window of pocket time, constantly guarding our house against time thieves and trying to optimize our fun, there is a massive risk of taking "don't waste time" to a highly toxic extreme.
Oh, for sure. Toxic productivity is a real trap.
We could easily end up feeling like every single second of our existence must be monetized or optimized for relentless productivity. And to their immense credit, the educators provide a vital, necessary correction to this trap.
Yes. This is where they introduce the word balance. They define balance as a good mix, not too much, not too little, and they address the anxiety of optimization head on. The host of the channel asks directly, if we say don't waste your time, does that mean we must work and study all the time, every single minute?
And what do they say?
And the answer provided is a resounding, definitive, non-negotiable no.
Rest is not wasting time. That was a direct quote from the text. And honestly, it might be the most liberating, validating sentence in this entire deep dive.
It really is.
To illustrate exactly why this is true, they use the phone battery metaphor. We all inherently understand how a smartphone works. If you use it all day, running heavy video apps, keeping the screen on maximum brightness, and you never ever stop to plug it into the wall, what happens?
It dies. It's done.
It becomes a completely useless, heavy brick of glass and metal. Humans, the text argues, are exactly the same. If we run around, work, study, optimize every minute, and try to utilize every pocket of time without ever stopping, our internal biological battery goes to absolute zero.
It is a striking paradox that we often treat our electronic devices with far more care and reverence than our own biology.
Wow. Yeah, you're right.
You would never expect your phone to seamlessly render a 4K video when it is on 1% battery. It would glitch and shut down. Yet, we routinely expect our brains to execute complex cognitive tasks, regulate our emotions, and build new habits when we are deeply, deeply exhausted.
We just push through.
We push through. The text shares a great story of late-night failure to prove this mathematical point.
Let's talk about that story because it completely destroys the myth of hustle culture.
The speaker explains that they were incredibly tired late one night, but they pushed themselves to stay up and work on a project for 2 full hours. They ground it out. The result, the work they produced, was terrible.
Not surprising.
Right. It was full of errors and poor quality. The next morning, after sleeping and actually charging their battery, they sat down and did the exact same amount of work. But this time, it only took them 30 minutes, and the quality was incredibly high.
Hustle culture tells us that pushing through the exhaustion is a badge of honor. It tells us that resting is a luxury, or worse, a sign of weakness and a failure of discipline. But this story and this entire framework frames rest purely mathematically.
It is a pure return on investment calculation. Look at the data from the anecdote. 2 hours, so 120 minutes of exhausted, depleted effort yielded a negative return. 30 minutes of rested, fully charged effort yielded a high positive return.
So the math just doesn't add up for grinding.
It doesn't. Therefore, pushing through the fatigue late at night was actually the true waste of time. It was wildly inefficient. This means that quiet time, 8 hours of sleep, taking a walk without a podcast, and simply staring out a window are not a pause in your productivity. They are active, necessary investments in your habit-building ecosystem. As the text wisely summarizes, rest is preparing you to use your time better later.
So we have covered an immense amount of ground. We've gathered all the theory, we've gone through the vocabulary tour, we've unpacked the neuroscience of the metaphors. Now it is time to synthesize everything into the actionable blueprint.
Let's put it all together.
The text actually provides a very specific 4-step action plan that anyone can implement today to start building a habit that actually sticks. Let's break this blueprint down step by step.
Step 1 is to choose one tiny goal. This is the intentional tiny plan we discussed at length. This is where you abandon the vague ambition. You are not saying, I want to be a writer. You are giving the GPS a clear, microscopic address. I will write one single paragraph. Or I will do 5 push-ups. Or I will learn 3 vocabulary words.
Step 2. Decide exactly when you will do it. This is where you map your tiny plan to your newly discovered pocket time. You find a small coin in your day and you attach your plan to an existing routine using habit stacking. I will read 1 page while I wait for the kettle to boil in the morning. The kettle is the trigger.
Step 3. Make it fun. Ensure that the method of execution isn't a punishment that your amygdala will reject. Hide the medicine in the cheese. Connect the habit to music you love, to a show you are engrossed in, or to a subject you are genuinely curious about, so your brain generates dopamine instead of cortisol.
And step 4, this is the one that really struck me at a deep level. Step 4 is immediately after you finish your tiny plan, you must say something kind to yourself.
Out loud, even.
Yes, the text literally suggests saying out loud, "Good job, I did my small plan." They say this tiny sentence of self-acknowledgement can completely change how you feel about your journey. And they use this incredible, powerful phrase, "Stop being your own enemy and become your own coach."
That identity shift from acting as your own enemy to acting as your own coach is arguably the true secret weapon of habit building. It is rooted in the science of self-compassion, which is often misunderstood as being soft or letting yourself off the hook.
Right, we think if we're nice to ourselves, we'll just get lazy.
Exactly. But neurologically, it is quite the opposite. Think about what happens when we rely on harsh self-criticism to motivate ourselves. When you beat yourself up for missing a day at the gym or for only doing 5 minutes instead of an hour, you act as your own enemy. You tell yourself you are lazy and undisciplined.
It's a brutal internal monologue.
It is. Your brain processes that harsh internal monologue as psychological stress. It releases cortisol. And as we established when talking about friction, the brain avoids stress. So by punishing yourself for a small failure, You are neurologically guaranteeing that you will want to quit the habit entirely to escape the stress.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy of failure. But a good coach operates completely differently. A good coach doesn't just scream at you when you drop the ball. A good coach recognizes the small victories. They pull you aside and say,
Right.
hey, you didn't play a perfect game, but you showed up today. You put the address in the GPS. You utilized a small coin. We'll build on that tomorrow.
Exactly. When you act as your own coach and actively provide positive reinforcement for completing a tiny 5-minute task, you generate a positive emotional response. You create a feeling of pride, competence, and safety.
Which feels good.
It feels great. And that positive emotion is the exact neurochemical signal your brain requires to encode the behavior as a long-term habit. You are quite literally rewiring your neural pathways to desire performing the action again tomorrow. Self-compassion ensures you return to the habit. Self-criticism ensures you abandon it.
Let's take a breath and recap the incredible, unexpected journey we've been on with this source material. We started by fundamentally redefining our relationship with time. We stopped seeing it as invisible water to merely pass or spill and started treating it as a tangible investment portfolio.
Which changes everything.
It does. We recognize that vague goals are just dead-end roads that lead our internal GPS in circles, and we surgically swap them out for highly intentional, frictionless, tiny plans.
We learn to stop throwing away the small coins of our day, choosing instead to aggressively mine our pocket time by attaching those tiny plans to existing immovable routines.
Yeah, the habit stacking.
We acknowledge the asymmetrical warfare being waged by algorithmic time thieves, and we decided to lock the door to protect our house, while simultaneously hijacking our own dopamine system to make our new habits genuinely fun.
And finally, we dismantled the toxic, pervasive idea that rest is a waste, recognizing that charging our biological battery is a mathematical necessity for long-term consistency. And we wrapped it all up in the neurological practice of becoming our own supportive coach. It is a complete, holistic, beautifully designed system.
It is a remarkable system, but a system only works if it is applied. The educators end their lesson by challenging their listeners with a specific question. They ask you to identify just one thing that wastes your time today and to make just one small change.
And I want to build on that challenge for you, our listener, with a final provocative thought. If we truly take these lessons to heart, if we genuinely view our time as an investment, and we understand the absolute biological necessity of a charged battery, are we unintentionally letting the guilt of not constantly working act as our biggest time thief of all?
Oh, that's a deep cut.
Think about it. When you are sitting on the couch, supposedly resting, but your brain is spinning at 1,000,000 miles an hour with guilt about the emails you should be answering or the chores you should be doing, you aren't resting. You aren't learning. You aren't growing.
You're just stressed.
You are just draining the battery while sitting perfectly still. You are pouring crisp water directly onto the floor.
That is a profound question to sit with. Guilt is the ultimate parasite of rest.
So what if the most productive, intentional, and transformative habit you build this entire week is simply giving yourself permission to stop? To put the phone in the other room, lock the door, lie back, stare at the ceiling, and let your battery fully recharge without feeling a single shred of guilt.
Now that would be a game changer.
What if genuine, unapologetic rest is the ultimate investment? Thank you so much for investing your precious pocket time with this deep dive today. We know your time is valuable, and we hope this time spent with us was water you actually drank rather than water poured on the floor. Until next time, be intentional with your time, and above all, be a kind coach to yourself.